Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Razul Pereira. A Pakistani human rights activist has called Islamabad's move to fortify its occupation of Gilgit-Baltistan by holding elections in the region illegal. He has urged people in the region to boycott the polls sponsored by Pakistan. Earlier this month, the Ministry of External Affairs issued a strong protest over an order by the Pakistan Supreme Court allowing the Imran Khan government to hold elections in the region of Gilgit-Baltistan of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. The government said that it had issued a démarche to protest what it called Pakistan's attempt to make material changes to the disrupted area by bringing federal authority to the region, which has functioned as a provincial autonomous region since 2009. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the Gilgit-Baltistan issue. Joining me on the program today are Dileep Sinha, former ambassador, Major General Dhruv C. Katoch, retired, Director, India Foundation, and Shakti Sinha, foreign affairs expert. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. General, let me begin the program with you. What do you make of everything that's happened in Pakistan, especially with regards to the Gilgit-Baltistan region?
You know, in my view, I think Pakistan is very concerned about Gilgit-Baltistan, and this concern got heightened, in my view, post 5th August 2019. Now, that was the time when the complete scenario in Jammu and Kashmir changed as far as the status of the erstwhile state was concerned. We saw the abrogation of 35A and the provisions of 370. And we also saw the state becoming a union territory. Now, I think that second part of it was a very key issue as far as Pakistan is concerned, because what really happened was with the union territory, the powers reverted to the center. And most importantly, the police powers reverted to the center. What has been happening for a very long time, when Pakistan has been using its influence to promote terrorism directly into the state of J&K, they did it with the ISI in direct cahoots with the Hurriyat leadership. And the Hurriyat leadership was also in touch with the local political leadership. They were in touch with the overground workers. The overground workers were in touch with the terrorist organizations like the Lashkar, the Jaish-e-Mohammed, HM, and the rest. So what really happened post 5th and 6th August 2019 was these linkages got broken. Not only did they get broken, statements, India made a very categorical statement that we have already said in Parliament that the entire state of Jammu and Kashmir is constitutionally a part of India, and the only dispute now is to recover the portions which are an illegal occupation of Pakistan. Now, I have, in my own terminology, I put this areas of illegal occupation into two. In the present circumstances. One, I call it Pakistan-occupied Gilgit-Baltistan, right? Which is really Pakistan-occupied Ladakh now, right? I'll use the terminology POL for the areas of Gilgit-Baltistan, and I use the terminology POJK for the Mirpur-Muzaffarabad region. Now, for the first time, this is the dramatic shift which took place, in my view. All the time, the concern of the Pakistani establishment and the military was how to get a stranglehold over Jammu and Kashmir. Now the situation has been reversed, and as per their own statements, their concern is now how to keep Gilgit-Baltistan, how to keep Mirpur Muzaffarabad. I think that is a very important shift. Number two, as far as the local people in Gilgit-Baltistan is concerned, you see, right up to 2009, they had no status at all. As per the constitution of Pakistan, ever since independence, either Gilgit-Baltistan or Mirpur Muzaffarabad is not a part of Pakistan. Right? Now, these people had no constitutional status. They had no representation in the Pakistan Assembly. They had no representation in the courts. They had no redressal to any grievances. They've had their economic development is perhaps the lowest in the world. Leave aside Pakistan, which is already low. Even amongst the world standard, Gilgit-Baltistan is absolutely at the depths. They are being exploited in the China-Pakistan economic corridor, by which their land is used to enrich the rest of the country. They have been evicted from the land. I think it was 1970 when the orders were changed, and they started buying land in this area. You know, the settlers started coming in. So we are having ethnic problems there. We are having economic problems there. And all this has now finally led up to a great deal of resentment. What Gilgit-Baltistan needs is support. And I think once the people of India start giving them their support, moral support, diplomatic support, I think these are very, very important for them to also claim that okay, this is our land, we are a part of India, and we want to join our motherland. Now, are we going to come to that? Time will tell.
All right, taking the discussion forward now, let me go to the two Sinhas on the panel one by one, starting first with you, Dilip Sinha. At some level, do you believe that the Imran Khan government is spooked really as far as Pakistan-occupied Kashmir is concerned and is trying to pull all stops really to try and get proper control of the region?
See, Imran Khan government has been trying to get over this legal hurdle that it faces with regard to the order that the previous government had issued, the PMLN government had issued, called the Gilgit-Baltistan Order for 2018, under which the constitution, the structure of the government in the northern areas was changed a little bit. Now, here one has to keep in mind that Gilgit-Baltistan's status is slightly different from that of what is called AJK by Pakistan, or POK as we call it, which is the Mirpur Muzaffarabad area. At least on paper, Mirpur Muzaffarabad is a separate country. It has its own constitution, and it has its own assembly, it has its own prime minister and president. Of course, there is the Ministry for Kashmir Affairs in Pakistan, which actually controls this region. But in the case of Gilgit-Baltistan, the name is unclear. The name has changed at least twice. And its status is also extremely unclear because it is not an independent territory on paper even. It is actually a colony of Pakistan because all the three constitutional orders that have been issued to lay down the structure of this area have been orders of the government of Pakistan, not even laws of parliament. There have been executive orders issued by the president on the advice of whatever of the prime minister. So the last order that was issued in 2018 was challenged in court. And eventually, last month, the Supreme Court said you can go ahead with the elections to be held there. In the last election that had taken place under the previous order, which was the order of 2009, I think, where there was an assembly, the order was passed in 2009. The elections were held 6 years later, and the two main parties of Pakistan, the PMLN and the PPP, had won. And the PMLN isn't currently in power, and the term of this assembly expires in June. So Imran Khan is optimistic that if elections are held today under his control, then his party will be able to come to power. Pakistan has changed the demography of this region substantially. As we all know, this region has a population of essentially of Shias and Ismailis and Noor Bakshis and other people. The Sunni population used to be very small here, by 5% or 10%. It's now gone up to more than a quarter of the total population. But controlling this region is extremely important for Pakistan because this region houses the famous Karakoram Highway, which is extremely important for China. So law and order in this region is extremely important, and the direct control of the central government, that is Islamabad government, is extremely important here. At the same time, Pakistan has the dilemma of how to allow a certain amount of local self-government so that at least it can show that there is democracy in the state, in the region. Otherwise, there is this constant criticism that there is no self-rule at all in this place. So Imran Khan has this dilemma of how to balance this central control at the same time having a little, at least a semblance of autonomy in the region. So this constitutional order or the executive order that he had issued 2 years ago to regulate the government of this region tries to balance the powers of the Prime Minister of Pakistan with the slight bit of delegation of power to the local authorities.
Okay, all right. Taking the discussion forward and taking the points that Dilip Sinha is making forward with you, Shakti Sinha. Let's talk about he spoke about semblance of autonomy for the region, but Imran Khan certainly wants to show the world there is some semblance of control over the region as well, because it's a very strategic region at the end of the day. Let's not forget that China also has some major interest in the region as well. So all of this plays a very big and an important role if you look at it holistically, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I think the China angle is a very, very important angle and not stressed enough. See, CPEC passes through Gilgit-Baltistan. China wants to fund major part of CPEC to international institutions that it has set up, of which India is a part, like the Asian Investment AIIB, then the New Development Bank, etc. All those lending criteria imply there should be a sovereign. You lend to an entity in a sovereign. Gilgit-Baltistan technically does not have a sovereign for reasons that have been described by both General Katoch and by Ambassador Dilip Sinha. Therefore, the need for Pakistan has been under pressure from China. Please declare this a province of Pakistan. Then we can move ahead. Pakistan obviously cannot declare it as a province because this whole Kashmir case then goes to fail. And it has in this dilemma. At the same time, there is disaffection within the Gilgit-Baltistan because, again, as pointed out, these people were deprived of normal rights of citizenship of anywhere. Now, I'm not getting into the angle is Pak occupied. Of course, this is Pak occupied. Of course, they're Indian citizens, but they're under the occupation of Pakistan till the order of 2018, the legal framework order of 2018. They could not exercise any rights outside Gilgit-Baltistan. Now, under the 2018 Act, and as clarified by the Supreme Court in the recent judgment, those powers of citizenship can now be exercised by residents of Gilgit-Baltistan, any part of Pakistan. So there is a move to bring about soft statehood to satisfy the requirements of international lending, but not enough to give it autonomy. And yet, and because Pakistan cannot afford to give autonomy, being the sensitive nature, is not well connected even today. The only link is the Karakoram highway. It takes 24 hours to get from Islamabad to Gilgit. Skardu is much further off. So there are problems. They wouldn't like to, then it's predominantly Shia even today, despite the fact that the state subject rule was scrapped in 1974. We are changing it now. Pakistan is angry. They removed it in 1974 to encourage Sunni population of Punjab to shift to Gilgit-Baltistan to change the demography there. So they mistrust demography. The Ismailis, the Thinga Iranian agents, they have all kinds of tensions there. So they want to keep control. So even though there's an assembly, now to be called the Gilgit-Baltistan Assembly, like all other state assemblies in Pakistan, the chief court is now called the High Court. So they're bringing about all these semblance of statehood, but ultimate power resides in the Gilgit-Baltistan Council, whose chairman is the Prime Minister of Pakistan, whose vice chairman is the governor of Gilgit-Baltistan, who is again a federal appointee, though on the suggestion of the chief executive of Gilgit-Baltistan. So it's moved towards giving them powers, one, to control disaffection, two, to tell China and others, listen, this is now almost a state, so we can have lending there. And yet they really can't give up control for fear of losing it. So they put themselves in this awkward box in a corner.
So it's a far more complex situation than it appears, is what you're suggesting. All right, taking the discussion forward now. So, General, let me take this issue of changing the demography of the region forward with you now. How much has it changed over the years? Clearly the social structure too has changed in the region. And how big a problem is it?
I think this is a very major problem. The question, very frankly, it is not so much that the Sunnis have moved in into Shia areas. There are many people there. When we go back 30 years or 20 years, when this divide wasn't there, you would also have intermarriages between the Shia and the Sunni, which is very surprising, really. You will not see such intermarriages anywhere in India. But you will have it, you had these intermarriages in Gilgit-Baltistan. And there are very prominent people like Senghe Sering, who's based in the US. He's one of those examples of this sort of a marriage, the Shia-Sunni marriage. But what happened when the Sunnis came in is, it was the Wahhabi lot which came in. And they came in with a specific motive. You see, they came in with that motive to change society. And I think that has been the real problem, because then you have the people like the Lashkar-e-Taiba and such organizations moving into this area. They have been imbued with a very deep radical ideology. And I think that is the problem. Now, while, as you go further north towards the Karakoram highway, the influence of the Sunnis keeps decreasing. But as you're moving southwards, the influence keeps increasing. It depends on which type of area, which type of areas have been dominated. But there has been a deliberate attempt actually to put in the majority Sunni population, to get the Punjabis in there, to get the Pakhtuns into there, to change that demography. And I think this is what is of concern to them. Ultimately, they are, when we actually look into these areas, we are talking of areas which are very high altitude. 6 of the highest mountains of the world are in this region. This is the reservoir of the world. When we are looking at the Indus, and this was the waters of the western rivers which was given to Pakistan, and the major river is the Indus. Now, the point is that the major precipitation as far as the Indus is concerned takes place in the Gilgit-Baltistan region, right? And that constitutes over about 80 to 90% of the total water flow. This is the place which has all the highest peaks. The entire water reservoir is actually in this area. Now, these are the resources which are available because this water flows down to Pakistan. They make use of this water. They have made the dams, the Demla Dam and other dams which are coming up. Now, when all the dams are made, the consequences of those dams have to be borne by the local people. The benefit goes to the people in the plains. When economic development takes place there, or when they are trying to extract minerals, or when they are constructing the highway, the destructive aspects of development is taken by the local people, but the benefits are going down to the people in the plains. The jobs are going to the Chinese who are there, or they're going to the Pakistanis who have come from the plains, from Punjab and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the Pashtuns who are getting those jobs. Now, what have the local people got? That is the whole point. They have got absolutely nothing. And I think this is one of the reasons. When you even see their education level, it is just about 14%. 1/4. This is the time at pre-independence India, we were better than that. So 14%, I think it is pretty low in areas of Gilgit-Baltistan. So there has been a very concerted move. I mean, I won't say it's a concerted move, but they have been left back in the developmental chain. And I think this needs to be rectified. I don't think the Pakistani state is going to do it. The people will have to fight for it. And that is one of the reasons why they are actually going in for, they are opposing the state. They need their rights, and those rights have been denied to them.
Okay, all right, Mr. Shakti Sinha, I saw you shaking your head there. Is there something that you'd like to add?
No, actually, literacy levels are much higher now than what General said. And what has happened is that because of lack of opportunity, there's lots of migration has taken place of educated people to cities of Pakistan like Karachi. Karachi, in fact, has a very large population of people from Gilgit-Baltistan because there are no economic opportunities in Gilgit-Baltistan. So that itself again causes this problems in the sense that yes, the money flow is coming in, but all the educated people are leaving. So it's kind of imbalanced, very, very imbalanced society, which is why it further causes of tensions and problems. That was the point I was making.
Okay, all right, Ambassador. So as far as India is concerned, I mean, of course, we issued the démarche, and then we strongly criticized the Pakistan Supreme Court's decision to allow polls to take place there. But as far as India is concerned, what are our options really? Should we do something about it?
We should certainly assert our right to the area, because if we do not, then by under international law, by tacit silence is taken to tacit consent. So we should ensure that whenever Pakistan takes any such measure, we register our opposition to it. In addition, I think we should certainly take up internationally the human rights situation in that place, because that is something that we do internationally, in any case, for all regions of the world. And for this region, which we claim to be ours, we have a special responsibility towards the people there. In addition, we have also the responsibility of supporting those people who face the wrath of the local government, because the government comes down very strongly on anybody who criticizes or opposes Pakistan in Pakistani control or Chinese control of that region. And such people need assistance, need support, because otherwise they're left absolutely helpless. So we must give moral support to these people and support in any other manner that they want, because they, after all, have a right to live, and their rights need to be protected. The international community has a responsibility towards it. If the international community doesn't do anything, then we certainly have a responsibility towards these people, and we should provide assistance to them to ensure that their voice continues to be heard and they do not feel that they have been abandoned by the international community, especially by India. And of course, there's also the strategic importance of this area, but we should not treat this area as a real estate the way China or Pakistan does. We should treat it as a place where there are human beings living and they have rights, both as human beings and as potential citizens of India, and those rights need to be protected, and this is what we should raise our voice for, both internally and externally.
Okay, all right. So, Mr. Sinha, this is where I'd like to take this particular aspect forward. This is something that the general raised in his opening remark as well. We need to continue to support the people of Gilgit-Baltistan. Can we do that? What kind of support can we provide? Is it just we voice our support, or is there more that we can do and that we should do?
I think yes, we have to provide support, and but providing support is not very easy. Was Ambassador Dilip Sinha is completely right. Internationally, at human rights forums and other forums, we should take it up very strongly, the way Pakistan does. Every second day, there is something on Kashmir in the United Nations by Pakistan. They won't get them anywhere, but they want to keep the pressure high, kind of a thing. Now, we started recently putting out the weather bulletins of Gilgit-Baltistan and other parts of Pak occupation territory onto our meteorological weather predictions, etc. Pakistan immediately started putting about Leh also. So when it gives support, that there's always going to be a counterattack. So to be very careful about it. Now, one more tension is there which we have to handle is that the political leadership of Gilgit-Baltistan today in the territory are asking for full citizenship of Pakistan, by and large. That is the main demand of the political parties of Gilgit-Baltistan. Whether they represent all the people or not, I'm not going into that. And therefore, when we give them the support, it's much better to, one, keep stressing that this is a part of India, that this is the illegal occupation of Pakistan, so that put Pakistan a little bit on the back foot, and on international forums, raise the issue of human rights violations on how, the point made, this is being treated as a piece of real estate by two countries, one a potentially big power, and the other its faithful ally, or whatever you want to call Pakistan. And therefore, just because the numbers are small, 1.3 to 1.5 million. We don't even have a census of how many people there are. Estimations range from 1.3 million by the government of Pakistan to 1.8 million by Javed Barki, a Pakistani economist. This is the kind of variation you have in populations. So we have to highlight these are the kind of issues. Now, many people suggest we should provide for, now we have kept seats technically in the Kashmir Assembly for them. Can we have the representatives in the Assembly? The answer is no. But can we give scholarships to their students to study in India? Think about it, because Pakistan will start giving scholarships to students of the Kashmir Valley. So, the kinds of things we can support them has to be very, very nuanced. But yes, use places like Iran also to raise the issue. Iran is always at the forefront of supposedly persecution of people. Talk to them that the pressure on the Shia population, the Sunnis were approximately 15% upper limit in 1948. Today they are 25 to 30%. Earlier there were two small districts at the south, Diamer and Astor, which are Sunni districts. Now they have gone much further up. They never go up to Hunza and Nagar because that's awful weather. But at least the populated parts, the Gilgit city, they're becoming more and more powerful. Pressure on the Shia population, particularly on the Shia imams, is there from the Wahhabis, who have even opened a mosque in Skardu. Skardu is as far as it's possible to go in that territory from anywhere in Pakistan, and yet they have gone there. So, this is the kind of thing which have to be brought up, that they also feel, the citizens there, the people living there, they're not citizens of Pakistan, they're Indian citizens, they should feel that on their cultural and religious matters also, India is standing up with them, and we don't view them as a piece of territory because they are sitting on minerals or on water. That is what the kind of support that we can give to them.
Okay, time now to get closing remarks from all my panelists with the best way forward, starting first with you, General.
I think it is important to give both political and diplomatic support. This is something which we can do. One statement from the Prime Minister can really alter the dynamics. It is just a statement, but it gives a great deal of hope to the people. I agree with Mr. Sinha when he said that, from the side of the leadership in Gilgit-Baltistan, they desire Pakistani citizenship. Now, why do they desire Pakistani citizenship? It is because they know they have a feeling they won't get Indian citizenship. You see, if there is some way they can get it from India, I think they will jump for it. That is the whole point. So I think this political and diplomatic support, I think, should be one important step. And the second one is, regardless of the consequences or what Pakistan will do, let us give them some of the reserved seats for J&K, which are there for Gilgit-Baltistan and Mirpur Muzaffarabad, both in the J&K Assembly and in Parliament. We have said it very clearly in the Constitution, it is ours. Now let us walk the talk. This is my view.
Okay, all right, Dilip Sinha.
I agree with the general here. The fact is that Pakistan in many cases is giving support to whoever they want to. And in fact, they are giving not only support but promoting terrorism against India. So we can't imagine what worse Pakistan can do. It's already used up all its tricks in the armory. It is for us not to decide how much we want to, how far we want to go. Of course, we should ensure that we do not let the people of Pakistan down. That is extremely important. We should not ever lead them up the garden path and then leave them over there in the lurch. So whatever we do, it should be with a carefully crafted policy where we know that we can walk the talk. Because the first thing they can do, as I said, is to abandon them at a certain stage after having given certain hope to them. So we should be careful with that, certainly. Now, whether we can have enough representatives of them to take up the seats in J&K, that is something that I think we'll have to see, whether we have representatives who can possibly do that. But quite certainly, we can give shelter to people who are being hounded out of that place. That is something that we should certainly be able to do. That's one of the things that we have done for many other neighboring countries. We should certainly do that. That won't even be asylum because they are our citizens. And certainly international diplomatic and political support we should certainly give them. And then see as things move on how far we can go with this.
Okay, all right. And Shakti Sinha, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
Thanks. Very quickly, yes, we should publicly take it up internationally. Because when people think Kashmir all over the world, they think of the valley. Valley is one. In the old Raja's princely Jain, Jammu Kashmir, valley was just one of the provinces, Subai Kashmir. There was Subai Jammu. There was Subai Ladakh, of which Pakistan's Kardu was a part. There was the Gilgit Agency, Hunza separately. So we have to bring up this mosaic properly to explain to them the Kashmir situation is complex, it's layered, multi-layered, and that we are committed to the liberation of that and to supporting the people exercising full rights, and that the human rights violation carried out by Pakistan should be brought to the international attention very strongly, very starkly. I think that will be our biggest support to the people of Gilgit-Baltistan if they know that their causes are being taken up internationally in Geneva, in New York, on the pages of newspapers in the world and on the TV stations. That is the kind of support they need.
Okay, all right. On that note, then we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. What's coming out of this discussion is India needs to provide support for the people of Gilgit-Baltistan in any way possible, locally, internationally, overtly, covertly, is what the panelists are suggesting. With that, it's a wrap. See you again next time.